From KGW News, this is Straight Talk with Laurel Porter.
Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Laurel Porter. There are 56,600 people who belong to the Greater Portland Jewish community. That number has grown considerably in the last decade. And now there's a new study on the Jewish community in Oregon and Southwest Washington. It is the first comprehensive study on the topic in 14 years. It's meant to help in making data-driven decisions about programs and initiatives that could best benefit the entire Jewish community. In this episode of Straight Talk, we are joined by two leaders of the Jewish Federation of Greater Portland who were involved with the study, the President and CEO, Mark Blattner, and Board Chair, Mindy Zeitzer. Together, we'll look at the study and its findings, what barriers there might be to people getting involved in Jewish life, and what opportunities might exist to address those barriers, plus concern about anti-Semitism around the world, in the U.S., and here in the Pacific Northwest. Please welcome my guests, Mark Blattner and Mindy Zeitzer. Welcome to Straight Talk. It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you, Laurel.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
And it's such an interesting topic. Let's talk about the study. You know, what prompted the study, Mindy? What inspired it? Why did you want one?
Yeah, so it's a really great question. You know, anytime you go into a study of any type, you really want to go in with what are our goals of getting the information out of the study. And so for our Jewish community, there's so much work that goes into making sure people are engaged and engaged in the way that they want to be engaged and reaching all of the people that we want to reach. And in the past, a lot of that action has been based on anecdotal evidence or what people think the community looks like or needs. And so it really forced us to think about, you know, we need real data. What is our community? Where are people? What do they need? How do they practice Judaism? All of those things, which helps give the leaders of our community and the organizations of our community real information to work with.
So Mark, who did this study? How was it done? How many people did they talk to?
So we partnered with Brandeis University out of Waltham, Massachusetts to do the study. They've done about 30 Jewish communities around the country over the past 10 years, including West Coast communities like Denver, Seattle, and Los Angeles. The way they operated the study was that they reached out on a random sample, and they reached 2,560 individuals in the area and asked them either via telephone interviews or internet survey interviews questions about Jewish life and about the Jewish community based on their own responses. And it took from October of 2022 to January of 2023 to complete the survey.
So this isn't just Portland, though. What did it encompass?
So our survey went all the way from Southwest Washington, basically from Kelso, Washington, down through Lane County. So we also included the Corvallis area, Salem, etc. But what we're talking about today is primarily just the Greater Portland metropolitan area.
And I said you're both with the Greater Federation, the Jewish communities. What is that?
So the Jewish Federation of Greater Portland is, we like to see ourselves as the central convening, planning, and fundraising body for the local Jewish community. So we raise money to not only support a variety of local Jewish organizations and congregations, but also to send money over to Israel and to help Jews in need around the world.
So tell us a little bit, before we dive into the findings, tell us a little bit about the history of the Jewish community in the Greater Portland area.
So the first two Jews that we know of who came to the city came in 1849. And about 20 years later, there was about 500 Jews who lived here in Portland. Following the mass migration from East Europe and also Jews from Rhodes and Turkey in that area, they came here between 1880 to the 1920s. The number grew to about 8,000. So if we look back in the year 2000, there was probably 25,000 Jews. 15 years ago, there was 35,000 Jews, and today we've grown to be 56,000 plus Jews.
So what about that, Mindy? Were there surprises that you found in the study?
Yeah, there were actually quite a lot of surprises that came out. One of them is the numbers. We did not think that there were over 56,000 Jews in this area. The last information that we have is from 2008, which showed us that we had about 35,000. So this is significantly more than that. Another big surprise was where we're located in the city. There's a lot more on the east side than we had originally thought. We were surprised about Jewish literacy, how people felt about their own Jewish literacy, how comfortable they were in their own knowledge of Judaism. we were also really surprised about engagement. Their numbers really show that there's a lot lower engagement than we had originally anticipated.
And we're going to expand on a lot of those surprise findings. Mark, let's go back to the numbers, 56,600. I mean, that grew significantly. Talk a little bit about that and why you think that growth happened.
So what we've learned is that about 43% of the people who moved here in the last 10 years were between the ages of 35 and 49. So we believe they moved here for jobs. They came to Portland, or maybe it's the quality of life and all the beautiful benefits of the Pacific Northwest, but a lot of it had to do with jobs. And so that was one driving factor. We'll also talk more about how we're a young Jewish community and the number of young people who continue to move here because of what Portland has to offer them. In addition, I think that what's interesting, when I moved here 13 years ago, the perception was like, everybody's from Portland. Only 13% of Jews who live in Portland are native Portlanders, were born in the city of Portland. So certainly times have changed, things have changed, and as Mindy mentioned about just the geography, I think that's an important piece to talk about. There's this perception Jews have lived in Southwest Portland, and now we recognize that half the Jewish community lives on the east side.
Well, let's take a look at that, because you did have a graphic from the study that you shared with us, Portland, the Jewish Portland by the numbers graphic, and it shows some interesting things about where Jews live in the greater Portland area. If you could take a look at this, tell us a little bit about this and what's surprising about this.
I think number one is the vast majority of what I'll call Jewish infrastructure, synagogues, the Jewish Community Center, Jewish organizations, etc., are all on the west side. We really only have 2 Jewish facilities on the east side here in Portland, plus we have some Chabad organizations that are on the east side, and in Southwest Washington there's a synagogue and a Chabad as well. But so many Jews are living on the east side, but being underserved by Jewish infrastructure. So what can we do differently to reach those people and connect them in the ways that they needed to be connected to?
So that presents an opportunity that you didn't really know about.
True.
A challenge that exists.
Yes.
You know, I think there, speaking of just challenges, there were some barriers that came out, and location, traffic, things like that really came through as barriers to engagement amongst a couple of other findings that were barriers also, one being Jewish literacy and being comfortable going somewhere that is Jewish. Another one being finances, being able to afford it. And then the last one being that that the activities were interesting enough that they attracted people. So I think that barrier challenge is something that we really do need to look at because it does present a lot of opportunity.
Well, we'll talk more about that too. We have another graphic that shows more of the regional demographics and how long people have lived in the area and how many newcomers there are. 49% have lived in the region for 20 or more years. Another 17%, 10 to 19 years. 34% of Jewish adults have lived in the area since 2013. And 15% have been here fewer than 5 years. So quite a few newcomers. Mindy, does that present opportunities with all these newcomers?
Absolutely. It presents huge opportunities because, you know, like Mark was saying before, there's this feeling that the Jews in Portland have been here forever. But what these numbers show us is that there's a very significant number of people that are new and lacking that engagement. So here it is an opportunity for us to reach out to these newcomers and to help them be engaged in our community.
And you talked a little bit, Mark, about the youth of the Jewish community. A pretty large number of those who've moved into the region are younger. 31% of Jewish adults in Greater Portland are between the ages of 18 and 34. We have another graphic that shows that. What does that number mean for the community?
Well, I think we keep saying the word opportunity, and I think that's the overriding message that we got from the study. Look, we are younger than the general population of Portland, and we're one of the youngest Jewish communities in all of North America, based on the number of young adults that we have living here. The opportunity is they're here. We want to find avenues for their participation in Jewish life that meets their needs in the ways that they need it. One of the things that the study shared with us is that people are unsure how to navigate their way through the Jewish community. It's not as though anybody can't go online and find a synagogue or the Jewish Community Center, etc. It's more they want somebody to help them go with them, you know, be a partner with them. I don't want to say hold their hands, but almost hold their hands as they go through this process. The other thing that I think is important is 97% of people in the study said, I identify Jewishly and I'm happy to be Jewish. 60% of people don't participate in Jewish organizations. So what's the disconnect and what's the divide? And we see it oftentimes amongst the younger audience first. And if we can start attracting them, that's better for the future generations.
And this speaks to that a little bit, because I was listening to the presentation from the head researcher, and he said with all these newcomers, a lot of them haven't found their niche in Jewish life locally. Not that they don't feel welcome, but they don't know how to connect. So how, Mindy, talk a little bit more about that too. How can you sort of fill that gap and help them find somebody, like hold their hand and help them find how they can become more involved?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first part is really learning when they arrive, right? Who they are. And we as a community need to set up opportunities for newcomers to let us know they're here so that we can reach them. And then we need to start planning as a community, organizations, federation, events, activities, opportunities for them to be interested in order for them to come and connect with the community around them.
And just to add to that, we have to go outside of our walls. You know, oftentimes we're waiting for people to come to our institutions, come into my synagogue, come into my community center, etc. People are out there. How do we find them where they are? You know, Mindy talked about how do they let us know? In the old days, you know, if somebody moved to a new Jewish community, they would pick up the phone, call a synagogue or the community center or the federation, say, "Hi, I just moved to town. I'd like to connect." Today, you go online on social media, you go into Facebook, and you write, "I'm moving to Portland. Does anybody know anything?" And lo and behold, you have 500 new friends who are telling you what to do and where to do, and maybe none of those people are Jewish. And we want to find avenues to help connect them online, connect them all the way through the process.
And we've talked about young people, but as we chatted earlier, there's also challenges with older Jews who come to the area who don't feel like they can connect. Mindy, tell me about that.
Yeah, well, you know, I think a lot of younger people with families connect through their kids. And there's lots of opportunities to do that. And once your kids leave home, you become an empty nester, an older adult, there's less out there. And so we, again, as a community, need to do a better job of creating avenues to connect the older population.
And you mentioned earlier too, and Mark, feel free to jump in here too, that one of the reasons people may not connect is that they may not have confidence in their level of knowledge about Jewish culture, about Judaism, that they don't feel confident in connecting with the synagogue. How do you address that? You want to jump in?
I think there's a couple of ways, and the study actually showed some important ways. You know, there was a lot of information that came out that showed that the numbers of K through 12 kids that are engaged in any sort of Jewish education is really low, actually. And so project that forward, that creates adults with lower literacy and comfort around their own Judaism. So we need to now do things to lower the bar, right? Lower the entry point, do things to make everybody feel comfortable at activities. And then looking forward, what do we do to help our younger population feel more comfortable as they move forward into adulthood?
And your study also looked at financial well-being of the Jewish community. The stats showed that a lot of people are struggling. 27% of Jewish households said they either cannot make ends meet, that was 4%, or just managing to make ends meet, 23%. How can that, Mark, inform your decisions?
It was surprising news to us. What's also in the study is that the majority of people who are struggling financially are between the ages of 50 and 64. Okay, in many other Jewish communities, it's the older age segment, you know, people living off Social Security, et cetera. Here, it's people who are they're the sandwich generation, dealing with elderly parents, paying for college, helping their kids move on, do all those kind of things. It's not something we were prepared for. And it's something that we're going to put our think tanks and our big heads together to say, what can we do to help support these folks? And we don't have the miracle answer at the moment, but we're going to think it through.
And one of the barriers that you've told me about too, about connecting, is how expensive it can be to be fully involved in Jewish life. Can you tell me a little bit about that, Mindy?
Oh, yes, I certainly can.
Personally, you know that, don't you?
Absolutely. You know, everything costs. You know, joining a synagogue is expensive. sending your kids to a Jewish day school, if that's what you opt to do. It's a private school, so there's tuition. Sending your kids to overnight Jewish camp. It's expensive. We're talking thousands and thousands of dollars. If you're a family who keeps kosher, that's an additional expense. So it can be very expensive to live Jewishly. But, one thing I wanted to point out, we were talking about the quarter of the Jewish population who can really barely make ends meet. One of the findings that I really loved about this study was that even with that information, about 80% of our Jewish community gives charitably. Which I find to be...
It's a huge number.
It's a huge number. And I think it just underscores that really important Jewish value of giving back and supporting the community.
And speaking of giving back, I wanted to talk about what everyone is doing for people in Maui. So many people are so concerned about how people have been hurt, the destruction there. They're really in grief, and just even, you can't even really think about rebuilding yet, but so many people have jumped in to help. And you were telling me, Mark, that your federation is the first Jewish federation in the country to start a Hawaii response fund. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. We, as soon as we saw the news, we've done this for earthquakes in other parts of the world, whatever natural disasters there may be, and including the wildfires that were in Oregon just a few summers ago. So when we saw the news in Hawaii, we immediately opened up a mailbox. We have had hundreds of contributions, $18, $36, $100, whatever it may be. We've already sent $25,000 over to Hawaii. We were supporting the Hawaii Maui Strong Fund. We've sent money to the Jewish congregation in Maui, to the Chabad of Hawaii, and also the Jewish Family Service of Hawaii. We're very proud of the response, not just locally. We've had people from all over the country respond to us.
So you can respond. If you want to help out, you can go to that fund as well. And we also have a KGW Northwest Response Fund, and we're partnering with the American Red Cross. So I wanted to let you know how you can do that. Just text the word FIRE to the number on your screen, 503-226-5088, and we'll text you about a link where you can donate. So a couple of really great ways that you can help the people of Maui.
Great.
And coming up next, now that the Jewish Federation of Greater Portland has this extensive, incredible study with lots of good information, what is next? We'll also talk about anti-Semitism and how that has impacted some members of the local Jewish community. We're back in 2 minutes. Welcome back to Straight Talk. I'm Laurel Porter, and we are talking with leaders of the Jewish Federation of Greater Portland about a new comprehensive study of the local Jewish community. And I want to welcome once again my guest, the CEO of the Federation, Mark Blattner, and Board Chair, Mindy Zeitzer. Thanks again for being here to talk about this really important study. And one of the things that we didn't talk about that's so important, Mindy, and you're a nursing professor at Linfield, so I know this is really important to you. 42% of the people in the survey said they needed mental health services, and 34% of households required mental health treatment. That's a pretty big number, but is that in line with the rest of the country in general?
Oh, yeah. Right now we are having sort of a mental health crisis in our country. The pandemic did not help that in any way, shape, or form. And, these numbers really just support that crisis. And what it really pinpoints is that we need to be working to really help improve the mental health of not just our country, but of our country, but the Jewish community also. And, I think a lot of times as leaders, we like to think, our community is untouched, whatever the leader of whatever community you're leading. And these are really important because our community is touched by this mental health crisis that our whole nation is having.
So many age groups struggling, including
Across
youth. I want to touch on a rather disturbing part of the report, and that's how many of those surveyed are very concerned about and or have experienced anti-Semitism. 63% are very concerned about anti-Semitism around the world. 60% are concerned about anti-Semitism in the U.S. Now, only 32% are very concerned about it in the greater Portland area, but that's still nearly a third. 18% of Jewish adults personally experienced one or more anti-Semitic incidents in the past year. And for just under a third, concern for their safety or comfort as a Jew has caused them to change their behavior in the past year. So let's talk about that. What are your thoughts, Mark?
It's probably the most upsetting part of my job is to read the news and hear what's going on. And it's also the thing that keeps me up at night is, am I going to get a phone call that there's been some sort of anti-Semitic attack here in Portland? And we have had issues here in Portland, but we are, because of what's going on, we have hired actually a director of community security to work with every Jewish institution to make sure that they are as safe and secure as they possibly can be. At the same time, we work with the United States Department of Homeland Security on these nonprofit security grants. And our goal is to maximize the opportunity to bring funding to our Jewish organizations for, to lack of a better word, to harden the institutions to make sure that the bad people can't get in.
You mentioned the security grants from the Homeland Security Department. They awarded 8 Jewish organizations, mostly synagogues, small grants to help guard against growing anti-Semitism and terrorism threats. Let's listen to Senior Rabbi Michael Kahana from Congregation Beth Israel and the Executive Director of Middleman Jewish Community Center, Stephen Albert.
We remain a welcoming community, and we are proud of our identity, and we know that anti-Semitism is not reflected by the majority of the people in our community by any means, and yet individual bad actors are also a reality.
Sadly, we occasionally find flyers or have graffiti. We've had a number of years ago we had a bomb threat. So there have been various incidents that have made us concerned, and when we look sort of at what's happening regionally and nationally, we know that it's important to be proactive about security.
A number of other organizations also received funding, a total of $20 million, which is so sad that money is needed, but I'm sure it's welcome, Mindy. You might have thoughts about the anti-Semitism in the report.
Oh, yes. I think, like the numbers show, these are real people we're talking about, people that have been impacted by anti-Semitism. And, I've been impacted by anti-Semitism. My family has. And obviously, lots of people in our community are concerned about it. And I think these are just real action items for us in terms of how do we move forward with this information.
I think it's one thing to be worried about anti-Semitism. The fact that 1 in 5 Jews in the Portland community have experienced anti-Semitism, or the fact that 1 in 3 Jews now change their behaviors. I'm not going to wear a Jewish star around my neck. I'm afraid to wear a yarmulke or a kippah on my head, or do something overtly Jewish. That's troubling to me. We live in a beautiful country, in a beautiful place. We shouldn't have to have those worries.
That is very troubling. And you talked about the tasks that are ahead now. Now that we have the report, we have a couple of minutes left to talk about what's next. What's next, Mindy?
Yeah, we have lots of sort of moving balls in place at the moment. We're going to be starting some think tanks. And Mark, I think, wants to talk a little bit more about what those think tanks are going to look like. But we're bringing everybody from the community together to really look at the findings and the data that we have to make very strategic moves so that we can engage everybody as a whole community and move forward.
Mark, what do the think tanks look like?
So it's nice to know how many Jews live here. The question is, what are we going to do with all those Jews who live here? So we're looking at think tanks that include Jewish literacy that we've talked about. How do we deal with the mental health crisis? How do we address anti-Semitism? How do we manage this geography spread of the Jewish community? But some things that we didn't talk about is Israel engagement. Half of the Jewish community here in Portland has been to Israel. At the same time, there are varying views on Israel itself and its policies and its government here in our community. How do we have that dialogue and that interchange? Another area of key importance to us is volunteerism. In the study, about 50% of the Jewish community volunteers, but only 19% volunteers within the Jewish community. You talked about age segments. There's a boomer generation out there that has time and talent that we want to utilize to benefit our Jewish community. So we're going to be doing this over the next few months, working with all of our partners in the Jewish community as well as in the secular community, and hopefully we'll have different results the next time.
What about financial well-being? We talked about that. How do you address that?
Well, first, I just want to say that I believe all of our Jewish organizations are as welcoming and as open to helping people who wish to join or to participate in activities to make financial costs as little of a barrier as possible. So I think that's important. But the question is, is it more money? Is it more scholarships? Is it more assistance? We're not sure. We're going to have to figure that out.
About 30 seconds left, Mindy, for final thought.
Yeah, so I think my final thought is that this study gives us a lot of information about how heterogeneous our community really is. And we are one people. And so really looking at how do we move forward as a community together as one, taking into account all of these diverse factors, is something that we're all going to be diving into this next year.
10 seconds. Can you do a final bow on this?
Yes. If we don't do our job to address the issues in the study, then we're not doing our job. We're going to make it happen.
Absolutely.
Well, Mark Blattner, Mindy Zeitzer, thank you so much for joining us here on Straight Talk. And thank you for watching and listening to our podcast. You can find our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for KGW Straight Talk. Join us next week. We're hearing from the Oregon Education Association on what they say educators need right now as the new school year kicks off. We'll see you next week.